Hello everyone and welcome to episode 43 of the Layton Fitness podcast. Now in today's episode we're going to be discussing whether you should fluctuate calories on training days compared to non-training days. And this seems to be a popular thing to do for a lot of people in the fitness industry, and it really does depend on context. So I think it's first of all important just to take a step back and realise what we're trying to do for fat loss and muscle growth. So for example, fat loss, obviously we need to be in a net energy deficit over an extended period of time. Conversely, for muscle growth we need to be in a caloric surplus over an extended period of time. Now therefore, do we need to be fluctuating calories on a day-to-day basis? If you were just doing weight training once per day, so this will be the majority of people listening to this podcast, I would argue no, because the net caloric burn from day to day isn't going to be too significant. Conversely, if you had an individual that's training twice per day, an endurance type training, the net difference between caloric burn on the training day compared to the non-training day would be so significant. It really would be advantageous for that individual to have higher calories and carbohydrates on training days compared to non-training days. However, when we're discussing this podcast, we're mainly discussing individuals that are just training 3 to 5 times per week, just doing weight training. As such, the caloric burn between non-training days and training days is obviously different, but in my opinion is not high enough to say that you need to have high calories and carbohydrates on training days compared to non-training days. Now with that being said, the next point I want to come to is just personal preference. If you generally have a personal preference to have higher calories and carbohydrates on training days compared to non-training days, this is absolutely fine. However, it must come within the context of you're still in an energy deficit over the course of the week if your goal is fat loss. Conversely, if your goal is muscle growth, you still need to be in that net caloric surplus. So the point I'm making is, just say for example, if you were to have high calories and carbohydrates on training days, make sure that isn't negated by the caloric requirements on the non-training days. So for example, if your goal was fat loss and you did have high calories and carbohydrates on training days, make sure the non-training days are low enough to provide that energy deficit over the course of the week. So hopefully that makes sense. The point I'm making is, if you do have high calories and carbohydrates on those training days, make sure the rest of the week is set up accordingly with your goals. That's the most important factor. Now the reason I'm raising this is there seems to be a new theme within the fitness industry at the moment where people are recommending these kind of wild carbohydrate cycling methods where you almost get the impression they're claiming that you can eat as much as you want on training days or as much as you want on certain days of the week and you're not going to gain body fat. Now this is just complete nonsense. We need to be very careful that if you're following a carb cycling model that doesn't have this main philosophy in place, where they're almost arguing you can have these stupidly high carbohydrate refeed days or these stupid days where you're almost allowed to eat as much as you want, but that just completely ignores what you're doing the rest of the week. Just the main premise I'm making within this podcast is really focus on the week as a whole. Make sure the total calories and macronutrients are set up for your goals, whether that's fat loss or muscle growth. Then ultimately you can fluctuate those calories and macronutrients subject to your preference. However, for most individuals, I personally recommend more of a linear approach with a caveat you're just training once per day and you're just doing weight trainings. The same macronutrient calories on the same days, just because it makes it that much more simpler to follow. It prevents any confusion and it prevents you forgetting what you're actually supposed to be consuming that day, just because you're eating the same macronutrients and calories every single day. Just makes it more simpler, and then when you come to make changes, it's very easy once again. So hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully you can start applying this principle, and if you are fluctuating calories and carbohydrates on training days compared to non-training days, that's fine. Just realise it's going to be your personal preference when you continue doing this. If you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, you go to James Layton, Layton Fitness.co.uk. You click on the tab at the top of the page, you can download that immediately. You can also learn more about myself, my services and products on the website as well. Thank you very much. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Take care.